back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 38. And once again, just to reiterate, if you didn't catch the last episode, I have transformed this a little bit to the point where I am just talking about the top commander from the poll, and of course, making a deck list for that commander. So if you want to vote on the next poll, it is in the description below. Feel free to do so. The winner from the last poll is Rilsa Rael, Kingpin. 3 blue and a black human rogue 2/5 with Death Touch. When Rilsa Rael Kingpin enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. If you've completed a dungeon, that creature also gets +5/+0 and gains First Strike and Menace until end of turn. So in my last Underwhelming Commanders video, I talked about how it can be difficult to do these Underwhelming Commanders with newer sets because you don't really know how underwhelming they really are or how popular they're going to be. And then I thought, you know what, I'll just go ahead and do that anyway. And I ended up putting all commanders from Baldur's Gate in that poll. Why not? I actually took the 5 least popular commanders from Baldur's Gate currently on EDH Rec, and those are the ones that I put in there, and Rilsa ended up coming out on top by quite a large margin. So a lot going on here. First of all, the thing that we need to talk about right away is the fact that your commander entering the battlefield gives you the initiative. What exactly does that mean? Well, the initiative says whenever one or more creatures a player controls deals combat damage to you, that player takes the initiative. So of course, if you already have it, they're going to take it from you, very similar to the monarchy, right? Whenever you take the initiative and at the beginning of your upkeep, venture into Undercity. Now that's very important, not the same as venturing into the dungeon. So if you're in a dungeon already, you advance to the next room in that dungeon. If you're not, you enter into Undercity. And of course, you take the initiative even if you already have it. So even if we already have the initiative, even if we're already venturing into the dungeon by some other means, we're going to do it again when our commander enters the battlefield. There is some other dungeon stuff in here, so we will be venturing into other dungeons possibly, but mostly I think we'll be venturing into Undercity because of course that's what initiative specifically does. So if we look at Undercity here, it says right at the top, you can't enter this dungeon unless you venture into Undercity, which of course you're doing with the initiative mechanic. So when we gain the initiative, if we're not already in a dungeon, we will venture into Undercity. And the first one is search your library for a basic land card, reveal it and put it in your hand. That's pretty handy. You want to do that in just about any deck. And then you go through the rooms like you normally would in a dungeon. The last one on this, Throne of the Dead 3, is pretty darn good. Reveal the top 10 cards of your library, put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. It gains hexproof until your next turn, then shuffle. That's pretty fantastic. The important part here is we want to complete a dungeon. Whether it's Undercity or any other dungeon, completing a dungeon as fast as we can is important in this deck because of course our commander says if you've completed a dungeon, that creature gets +5/+0 and gains First Strike and Menace on a turn. We really want that ability and we want to get it as fast as we possibly can. So the quicker we can complete a dungeon, the better. So when our commander enters the battlefield, we're going to gain the initiative, which means we're going to immediately venture into the Undercity or whatever other dungeon we have, but any other venture into the dungeon mechanics is going to move us through that dungeon even faster. So we can put any of the other venture into dungeon stuff in this deck like Dungeon Descent or Dungeon Map. It's going to allow us to venture into the dungeon. If we're in the Undercity already, we can now move on to the next room with any venture mechanic, right? Imoen Mystic Trickster is a fantastic fit here. Background commander, 2 and a blue human rogue wizard 2/3, has ward 2. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, draw a card. So that's a great fit in the deck. Draw another card if you've completed a dungeon. So again, another card that wants us to have completed a dungeon. We really want to be completing a dungeon as fast as we can. This guy is going to allow us to draw 2 cards on our end step if we have the initiative and we completed a dungeon. That's pretty darn good. Savannah Calimport Cutthroat, another background commander. That's a perfect fit here. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, create a treasure token, create 3 treasure tokens if you've completed a dungeon. Tomb of Horrors Adventurer, another card that wants us to be completing a dungeon as fast as possible. When it enters the battlefield, we take the initiative. So again, we can gain the initiative here if we haven't yet, or if one of our opponents has it. But if we already have the initiative, again, this is essentially just venture into the dungeon, right? So when this enters the battlefield, we're just going to move another room forward in our dungeon. And whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. That's pretty good. If you've completed a dungeon, copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copies. That's pretty darn good. This is a 5 and a blue, so a 6 mana creature, but pretty powerful effect there. I also got Yonti Fangblade in here, Yonti Malison, both creatures that are working with the dungeon mechanic and also are sort of working with our commander, right? Yonti Fangblade is a 2/2 Death Touch creature, so that's fitting with what our commander's doing. We're doing a little bit of Death Touch tribal here. We also want to be getting for damage a lot too in this deck, so Death Touch creatures are great. Yonti Malison, again, same thing. Can't be blocked if it's attacking alone, which can be really good. Also, when it deals combat damage to a player, we get to venture into the dungeon, so it's fitting all the things we're doing in this deck. Don't forget, our commander has an ETB, so you can do a little bit of blinking here, right? And every time we do so, every time our commander's entering the battlefield, we're getting the initiative back if our opponents have stolen it from us, or if we already have it, we'll just continue venturing into the dungeon. So I put Conjurer's Closet and Thassa Deep Dwelling in here. It's just going to make us get through those dungeons faster. Again, we want to complete a dungeon as fast as we can here so we can get the maximum effect from our commander and from a lot of these other cards as well. Ravenloft Adventurer is a pretty decent fit here. 3 and a black, human, rogue, assassin, 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, we take the initiative. So of course, that's fitting what we're doing in the deck. If a creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile it and put a hit counter on it. Okay, that's not bad. This is a replacement effect, so our opponent won't get dice triggers. Hates on graveyard decks. And whenever Ravenloft Adventurer attacks, if you've completed a dungeon, defending player loses 1 life for each card they own in exile with a hit counter on it. And as a lot of people have pointed out, these exiled cards with hit counters on them work really great with Atrata the Silencer and Mari the Killing Quill, which I put both of those in this deck as well, even though you might not think that they fit. So of course, Atrata is a creature that can't be blocked. That part really fits the theme of what we're doing here. If we can give our Atrata a +5/+0, now that's an 8 power that our opponents can't block. That seems pretty good. Also, when it deals combat damage to a player, we exile a creature they control with a hit counter on it, and that player loses the game if they have 3 or more cards exiled with hit counters on them. So that's pretty good. I mean, we're not building our deck around this, but it does actually fit with our commander and with the other things we're doing, and Mari as well. It's doing that hit counter thing. It's going to fit with what we're doing. Also, assassins, mercenaries, and rogues you control have Death Touch, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a hit counter from a card that player owns in exile. If you do, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. That actually does kind of fit with what we're doing. We do have a decent amount of assassins, mercenaries, and rogues in this deck, our commander included. Our commander is a rogue, so now we can get in for damage with our rogue commander, and if we do, we can remove a hit counter from a creature that our opponent has in exile and draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. So all of this stuff sort of works together. I thought it actually fit in the deck. We can actually cause someone to lose the game with a Atrata at some point, maybe if we get lucky. I thought it was interesting to include all of these cards. I also thought a fantastic include here was Paradox Haze, and I don't know if anyone's thought of this or not. Works great with the initiative mechanic because, of course, again, initiative, unlike Monarchy, which triggers on the end step, triggers on your upkeep. Whenever you take the initiative and at the beginning of your upkeep, you venture into Undercity. So if we have Paradox Haze, we're going to give ourselves an extra upkeep, which means it will trigger twice. We will venture into Undercity on our first upkeep, and then we will do it again on our second upkeep. Again, just helping us move through those dungeons faster and get them completed faster. Another thing we're going to be doing here a little bit is sort of Death Touch tribal, right? So I put a Hooded Blightfang in the deck. It's just a great creature to have in a deck. It's a 1/4 Death Touch creature, but whenever a creature you control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's a nice drain effect to have in a deck where your commander has Death Touch and also you're giving Death Touch to your creatures. Also, whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. Planeswalker, so that's pretty handy. Just nice added value to I'm going to be probably attacking with a lot of Death Touch creatures on my turn all the time anyway, right? Another deck where I think Strionic Resonator is a fantastic fit, and mostly because our commander, again, has a really important ability that we want to be copying. Actually has two, so the ETB is also a triggered ability. We can copy that. Again, we gain the initiative, and then if we do it again, we'll just venture into the dungeon again, so we'll just get through that dungeon faster. That second ability probably is the one you want to be copying with your Strionic Resonator more so though, right? When we attack, if we've completed a dungeon, target attacking creature is going to get +5/+0 and gain first strike and menace. Now we can copy that ability with Strionic Resonator and give two of our creatures +5/+0 first strike and menace. So I think a Strionic Resonator is a good fit here. Of course, we want some creatures to be targeting with that ability, and absolutely the best one, without a doubt, is Cephalid Constable. This is just such a fantastic card because of the wording that it has on it. 1 blue Cephalid Wizard 1/1. When Cephalid Constable deals combat damage to a player, return up to that many target permanents that player controls to owner's hand. So if we give our Cephalid Constable our commander's second ability there, it's going to be a 6/1 first strike Death Touch menace. Now our opponents can block. It's going to require two creatures, of course, because our Cephalid Constable has menace. It's also got first strike and Death Touch. So worst case scenario here is we're likely going to kill two of our opponent's creatures, but if they can't come up with the blockers, now we're going to connect and we are going to bounce a number of permanents equal to its power, which is 6. So we're going to be able to bounce 6 permanents on our opponent's board to their hand. That's going to be pretty close to game over for them. I mean, it's going to be hard to come back from it, right? Phenomenal fit in this deck. Dream Stealer is another card that has that magic phrase on it. When Dream Stealer deals combat damage to a player, that player discards that many cards. Now, of course, it's a 1/2, so typically that's only going to be one card they're discarding. It does have Eternalize for black, so you can exile it from your graveyard and make it a 4/4. So now if you connect, they're discarding 4 cards, but again, we're going to be using this with our commander's ability. So if I have my 1/2 Dream Stealer on the table, I give it +5/+0. Now it is a 6/2. It already has the menace. So again, we're in the same situation here where our opponents can try to throw 2 creatures in the way. They'll both die. If they can't block it though, they're going to be discarding 6 cards, probably end up going to be their entire hand. That seems pretty good, right? The only other card I could find that is dealing with the that many theme is Westgate Regent. Pretty good fit in the deck. 3 black vampire 4/4 with flying. Has ward discard a card. Pretty good. And whenever Westgate Regent deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So now again, we give that +5/+0 to our Westgate Regent. It is now a 9/4 first strike Death Touch, Menace, Flying. So almost assuredly, this is not going to get blocked. And when it gets in for damage, it is dealing 9 damage. So we're going to put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So it now becomes a 13/13 flyer, which of course, the next turn can be even bigger with our commander's ability. This guy's going to close out the game pretty quick if our opponents can't deal with it. And then just a whole bunch of other great creatures that we want to be getting in for damage with, like Shadow Mage Infiltrator, Dimir Cutpurse, right? That's sort of where you want to go with the rest of the deck. And I just put a whole bunch of creatures in this deck that want to be getting in for damage because that's what our commander does really, really well, is make it so that our creatures can get in for damage really, really easily. Even if they have the blockers, my opponent is going to lose 2 creatures. They don't have the blockers. Now they're probably going to take the damage. And then on top of that, I'm going to get some effect off of whatever creature I'm attacking with, like my Thief of Sanity or my Cabal Executioner or one of the other many creatures I have in this deck that want to be getting in for damage. I got a bunch of them. This is actually a pretty good commander. I'm surprised it's not more popular. Maybe people weren't sure exactly where to go because you're dealing with 2 very different themes here. Getting the initiative and then the whole Death Touch thing, even though the Death Touch thing does sort of work with the initiative because, of course, if your opponent takes the initiative, it's very easy for you to get it back, right? Because, of course, when you get in for damage, you get the initiative back as well. It's another thing sort of like with Monarchy where it's okay if we give it up, because when we gain back the initiative, of course, we're then venturing further into the dungeon. Once you've completed a dungeon, now you can just pretty much go in any direction you want. Again, you have some of the other dungeon mechanic stuff in here. So if we've already gone through the Undercity, maybe we can venture into some other dungeons and get some other stuff from them if we want to. You can go in any direction there you want. I think probably Undercity is the best dungeon there is. So venturing through that a few times might not be a bad thing. All in all, lots of great things you can do with this deck. I think it's a pretty fantastic one and a pretty good commander. Of course, the deck list for it is in the description below as always. And once again, the poll is in the description below as well. If you want to go vote on which commander is going to get a deck in the next Underwhelming Commander video. But that is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.